The 1,000 miles of steaming would take about 3 days, and just before entering the bay, a pilot came aboard. It was his job to guide us safely through the bay and up the river to the docks. And there's our final destination, Newstead Wharf, which is long gone since World War II. The location was great, close to everything, including MacArthur's headquarters. I was in the elevator of his headquarters one time when I was suddenly overwhelmed with an entourage of officers. Well, looking up, I could see a 4-star general backing me up against the wall to make room for his staff. Knowing who he was, I held my breath for 8 stories. And now, if anybody asks if I ever met General MacArthur, I can truthfully say, well, we bumped into each other once. MacArthur's army was housed in a tent city nearby. But he was also preparing to have his own navy. Aussies were the other half, and together it made a great fighting team. It was a quiet, friendly, old-fashioned city, and its hotel housed visiting officers such as Lyndon B. Johnson. Its large, sheltered harbor was the beginning and ending point for many round trips to New Guinea. MacArthur's pledge to return started here at Port Moresby, backed by limited naval forces. But now he's getting close to invading Cape Gloucester, and that's when MacArthur's Navy was born. Beside the Helm, it included these 2 destroyers and 3 others. The larger ships in the group were these 4 heavy cruisers. There were no battleships such as this, nor carriers. We were dominating the skies and didn't need them. The Helm's assignment was escorting troops and patrolling up and down the East Coast. Important? Absolutely. Before that happened, the Helm would be steaming thousands of nautical miles all through the South Pacific. You could double those figures most of the time with the anti-submarine zigzag pattern. And then on September 10, 1943, a very interesting trip to Mackay. Getting our very first radar suddenly enhanced our ability to detect enemy ships 100-fold. Sunday, September 12th, MacArthur's Chief of Staff approached Ensign Wacker, saluted, requested permission to come aboard. Mrs. Roosevelt was with them, looking like this in her American Red Cross uniform. She just simply wanted to say hello, having been at the Helm's christening in 1937. Mrs. Helm was her best friend as well as private secretary. Scuttlebutt has it that this young man approached Mrs. Roosevelt, called her by her first name, and asked if she would tell her husband that we had been away for 2 years and still needed repairs from Pearl Harbor. The story goes on to say she was gracious in reply and promised she would look in. The calendar flips to November 28th, 1943. The Helm is standing by in Gilly Gilly, Anchorage, and Milne Bay, getting ready to bombard Ring Ring Plantation near Gasmata and south of Cape Gloucester. The battle plan is quite simple. You go up as a column of 4, split in 2, and then commence firing exactly at midnight. After firing 400 rounds, the Helm sped away with the other ships under cover of darkness. A strike by the Army Air Corps later ensured that Ring Ring would no longer be a threat. All of this was the softening up portion of the later landings at Cape Gloucester. General Rupertus's veteran Marines, after recuperating an R&R, joined MacArthur. On December 24th, the Helm takes off with 74, joins 76, and arrives at Cape Gloucester the day after Christmas. And they arrived with a bang. The bombardment started at dawn, continued to 0700, and at 0900, the landing was made. The surf was high, the resistance low with the overwhelming bombardment. During this, the Seabees blended among them. They looked like Marines, they acted like Marines. With guns over the shoulder, they were ready to fight and die if necessary. All this possible by the tremendous naval bombardment, finished off by the Army Air Corps bombings and strafings. But it would take 2 months to completely secure the area. I can best summarize by saying the USS Helm and its undaunted crew were there. They did their job. They helped the Marines land safely to go on to complete an important step in winning the war against the Japanese. For the next 5 weeks, the Helm continued support of the Cape Gloucester fighting by escorting troop and supply ships from these New Guinea ports. From these ports plus Milne Bay. And that's where we got a surprise on February 10th, 1944. And what a surprise it was! The captain called the crew together at Milne Bay and announced to the crew, "We have orders to report to Mare Island for an overhaul." You can imagine the reaction. And then the big question, did she or did she not play a part? Unfortunately, we'll never know. But having been such a close friend of Mrs. Helm, we'd like to think that she did. Next morning, we were happily underway with the Mugford and the Bagley. We all had the same orders. We had been released to the 3rd Fleet to escort 3 ships to Guadalcanal. But that was just a leg. Our final destination, Mare Island, with a stop in Hawaii. When we reached the harbor, we were a rare sight. Well, that is, with all the Fletcher-class destroyers outnumbering us. There were a few light carriers around, but the big ones seemed to have been gone. Stopping for only 18 hours gave us little time for liberty. And the reason for the short stop, we had to escort the USS Maryland to Puget Sound before we could go to Mare Island. Escorting her to Puget Sound lost us a half a day from reaching home. But then once we spotted the Golden Gate, all was forgiven. And the excitement grew and grew as we steamed through San Francisco Bay, minutes away from those we loved. And this is Walt Anderson, inviting you to watch Part 3 soon, as the Helm joins Task Force 58 in the biggest battles of the war. And the excitement